My dear friends, loneliness is not always the absence of people. Sometimes loneliness is the absence of connection with ourselves, with purpose, with gratitude, and with peace. Today, in a world full of noise, notifications, and non stop comparison, many people are surrounded by crowds yet feel emotionally empty. But have you noticed something beautiful? Some of the simplest people, those who live with less, desire less, and expect less, often carry the deepest peace within them. Indian minimalists understand one profound truth. When the heart is uncluttered, life feels full. Minimalism is not about sleeping on the floor or owning only two shirts. It is about removing what distracts us from what truly matters. And when life becomes simpler, the soul becomes lighter. Today, let us explore 7 secrets why Indian minimalists rarely feel lonely and how their way of living quietly creates inner peace. Secret 1. They learn to enjoy their own company, my dear friends. One of the greatest fears people carry today is the fear of being alone. The moment silence enters the room, many immediately reach for their phones, television, or social media. Why? Because sitting quietly with ourselves has become uncomfortable. But Indian minimalists understand a powerful truth. Solitude is not punishment, it is an opportunity for self discovery. There was an elderly man living near Varanasi who had lost his wife many years earlier. His children had settled abroad, and people in the neighborhood often felt sorry for him because he lived alone in a small room near the Ghats. Yet every morning he would wake before sunrise, sweep the area outside his home, make himself tea, and sit peacefully watching the river flow. One young man asked him, "Baba, don't you feel lonely all day?" The old man smiled gently and replied, "Loneliness comes when you run away from yourself. Peace comes when you sit beside yourself." That answer changed the young man forever. You see, Indian minimalists do not depend on constant entertainment to feel alive. They develop hobbies like gardening, reading scriptures, walking quietly, cooking simple meals, or practicing meditation. These activities slowly build a friendship with one's own heart. Most people think happiness comes from always being surrounded by others. But if a person cannot enjoy their own company, even a crowded room will feel empty. Minimalists understand that inner companionship is more important than outer attention. When you learn to sit quietly without restlessness, you begin hearing your thoughts clearly. You understand your emotions better. You become emotionally stronger. And gradually, solitude transforms from something painful into something sacred. The person who becomes comfortable with themselves carries peace everywhere they go. Secret 2. They detach from constant comparison. Friends, comparison is one of the biggest thieves of joy in modern life. Earlier, people compared themselves with neighbors. Today, because of social media, we compare ourselves with thousands of strangers every single day. Someone is traveling abroad. Someone bought a luxury car. Someone appears happier, richer, younger, or more successful. Slowly, this comparison creates emotional exhaustion. Indian minimalists consciously step away from this endless race. They understand that peace cannot survive inside a mind that constantly competes. There was a school teacher in Pune who lived a very simple life. He wore plain cotton clothes, traveled by bicycle, and lived in a modest home despite teaching for over 30 years. His former students often became wealthy professionals and offered to help him upgrade his lifestyle. One student asked him, "Sir, don't you ever wish you had more?" The teacher smiled and said, "The moment I stop counting what others have, I realize I already have enough." What wisdom! Minimalists focus more on contentment than competition. They know comparison creates two dangerous emotions: superiority and inferiority. If you think you are better than others, ego grows. If you think you are worse, insecurity grows. In both situations, peace disappears. Indian minimalists instead practice gratitude. They value simple food, meaningful relationships, health, and emotional stability. Because their happiness is not dependent on public approval, they feel emotionally lighter. When a person stops constantly measuring their life against others, loneliness also reduces. Why? Because comparison isolates us emotionally. It makes us feel less than or disconnected. Gratitude reconnects us with life. A content heart may not own everything, but it sleeps peacefully every night. And sometimes that peace is more valuable than all the success in the world. Secret 3. They build deep relationship. Iron ships instead of large networks, my dear friends. Today, we are more connected digitally than ever before. Yet, emotionally, many people feel deeply disconnected. A person may have thousands of followers online, but nobody to sit beside them during difficult times. Indian minimalists understand that real happiness does not come from collecting contacts. It comes from nurturing genuine relationships. There was a grandmother living in Jaipur who spent her evenings sitting outside her small house making tea for neighbors. She knew everyone's struggles. She remembered birthdays, comforted grieving families, and encouraged children preparing for exams. She never became famous. She never used social media. But when she fell sick one winter, the entire neighborhood gathered outside her home praying for her recovery. Why? Because she invested in people, not popularity. Indian minimalists value presence. When they meet someone, they truly listen. During meals, they put away distractions and talk from the heart. They understand that emotional nourishment grows through attention and sincerity. Many people today suffer loneliness not because nobody loves them, but because interactions have become shallow. Conversations are rushed. Relationships are transactional. Everyone is busy proving themselves. Minimalists simplify their social lives too. They choose fewer but more meaningful bonds. They spend time with family elders, neighbors, childhood friends, and spiritual communities. These relationships create emotional security. There is something deeply healing about being fully seen and heard by another human being. Minimalists understand this truth beautifully. One meaningful conversation can heal more loneliness than 100 online interactions. The irony of life is this. People chasing attention often feel empty, while people offering genuine care often feel fulfilled. Deep relationships create belonging, and belonging creates peace. At the end of life, nobody remembers how many followers they had. They remember who stood beside them during their storms. Secret 4. They find joy in ordinary moments, friends. Many people postpone happiness. They think, I will feel peaceful after buying a bigger house, after retirement, after success, after my problems disappear. But Indian minimalists discover joy in ordinary moments long before life becomes perfect. He was a retired railway worker living in Chennai who spent his mornings watering plants outside his small home. He would smile while watching sparrows drink water from a clay bowl he kept near the gate. One day his grandson asked, Dadaji, how can you be so happy doing such small things? The old man laughed gently and replied, because life itself is made of small things. What a beautiful lesson. Minimalists train themselves to notice simple beauty: a cup of chai during rain, evening prayer sounds from a nearby temple, the laughter of children playing outside, or the comfort of a quiet sunrise. These moments may appear ordinary, but they nourish the soul deeply. Modern society teaches us to constantly chase excitement, but endless stimulation often creates emotional emptiness. The mind becomes addicted to bigger experiences while losing the ability to appreciate everyday life. Indian minimalists reverse this pattern. They slow down, they observe, they become present. And something magical happens when a person becomes present. Loneliness begins fading. Why? Because loneliness often grows when the mind is trapped in regrets about the past or fears about the future. Simplicity. Why brings attention back to the present moment? The happiest people are not always those living extraordinary lives. Often they are simply those who have learned to experience ordinary life deeply. Minimalists understand that peace is not hidden in luxury. Peace is hidden in awareness. When the heart becomes grateful for little things, even an ordinary day starts feeling sacred. Secret 5. They reduce mental clutter, my dear friends. Clutter is not only physical, it is emotional, mental, and spiritual too. Too many possessions, too many unnecessary desires, too many distractions, slowly they exhaust the mind. Indian minimalists understand that simplifying life outside also creates calmness inside. There was a businessman in Bengaluru who spent most of his life chasing wealth. He bought luxury cars, expensive watches, and a massive house. Yet, despite all this success, he constantly felt anxious and restless. He could not sleep peacefully. After suffering a health scare, he made a surprising decision. He donated many unnecessary belongings, moved into a smaller apartment, and simplified his daily routine. Months later, one friend asked him, Do you miss your old lifestyle? The businessman smiled softly and replied, Earlier, I thought I owned things. Slowly, I realized those things owned me. How true. Minimalists believe every possession demands energy. More items mean more maintenance, more worry, more comparison, and more attachment. Simplicity creates mental breathing space. Today, many people are emotionally overwhelmed because their minds are constantly overloaded with notifications, advertisements, endless entertainment, and pressure to achieve more. Silence has become rare. Indian minimalists intentionally reduce this noise. They limit unnecessary consumption, spend less time chasing trends, and focus more on peace than appearance. When the environment becomes simpler, the nervous system relaxes, thoughts become clearer, emotional stability improves. Loneliness also becomes less intense because the mind is no longer constantly distracted or overstimulated. A calm mind naturally feels more connected with life. Minimalists understand one important truth: freedom is not always about having more choices. Sometimes freedom comes from needing fewer things. The lighter the mind becomes, the easier it is for peace to enter. Secret 6. They serve others see. Lifelessly, my dear friends, one of the deepest reasons Indian minimalists rarely feel lonely is because their life is not centered only around themselves. They understand a timeless spiritual truth. When we help others heal, our own heart quietly begins healing too. Today, many people are trapped inside the prison of me, my problems, my stress, my loneliness, my disappointments. And the more the mind revolves only around itself, the heavier life starts feeling. Indian minimalists break this cycle through selfless service. There was a widowed woman living in Amritsar who lost her husband after 40 years of marriage. After his passing, her house became painfully silent. Every room reminded her of memories. She stopped talking to neighbors, stopped attending gatherings, and slowly loneliness began consuming her. One morning, a friend invited her to volunteer at a community kitchen near a local gurudwara. At first, she refused. She said, "I have no energy left for people." But after much encouragement, she finally agreed. The first day, she simply helped wash vegetables quietly. The second day, she began serving food to elderly visitors. Within weeks, something inside her slowly started changing. She began smiling again. She started talking to people. She felt useful again. Months later, someone asked her, "How did you overcome your loneliness?" Tears filled her eyes as she replied, "When I started feeding others, God started feeding my empty heart." What a powerful realization. Minimalists often live simply, but their hearts remain emotionally rich because they stay connected to humanity. They help neighbors, support community events, care for animals, teach children, or simply listen to someone in pain. Service gives life meaning. And meaning is one of the greatest cures for loneliness. A person who feels needed rarely feels emotionally empty. Modern society often teaches us to ask, "What can I get?" But spirituality asks a different question: "What can I give?" And strangely, the more love we give, the less lonely we become. Indian minimalists understand that happiness grows not by collecting attention but by contributing kindness. At the end of the day, human beings do not only need comfort, they need purpose. And service quietly gives both. Secret 7. They anchor themselves spiritually, friends, the final and perhaps most beautiful C. The secret behind the peace of Indian minimalists is spirituality. They may live alone physically, but emotionally they never feel abandoned because they experience a deeper connection with God, with nature, with existence itself. Today, many people are spiritually exhausted. Their minds are full of noise, fear, pressure, and uncertainty. They constantly search for distraction because silence makes them uncomfortable. But Indian minimalists slowly develop spiritual practices that create inner stability. There was a monk living near Rishikesh in a tiny ashram beside the river. He owned very little: a mat, a few clothes, and some spiritual books. One traveler asked him curiously, "Don't you ever feel isolated living here alone?" The monk smiled peacefully and pointed toward the flowing river, the mountains, and the evening sky. Then he softly replied, "How can I feel alone when existence speaks to me every moment?" What a profound perspective. Spirituality changes the meaning of solitude. Instead of feeling empty, silence begins feeling sacred. Indian minimalists often practice prayer, meditation, chanting, yoga, scripture reading, or simply sitting quietly in nature. These practices calm the restless mind and create emotional balance. When a person feels spiritually connected, they stop depending completely on external validation. Their peace no longer depends only on people, possessions, or achievements. One retired man from Haridwar used to spend every sunrise sitting beside the Ganga in silent meditation. Someone once asked him, "What do you think about during meditation?" He smiled and replied, "For the first time in life, I stop thinking and start experiencing." That is the beauty of spirituality. It takes us beyond mental noise. Loneliness often comes from feeling disconnected from ourselves, from others, and from life itself. Spirituality rebuilds that connection gently. Minimalists understand something modern life often forgets. The soul also needs nourishment, not just the body and mind. When the heart feels connected to something eternal, even solitude starts feeling peaceful. And perhaps that is why some of the simplest people carry the deepest calm within them.